The blockade of Artsakh, otherwise known as Nagorno-Karabakh, has entered its 19th day. To discuss this, I'm joined by CivilNet host and analyst Eric Hacopian. Eric, thanks again for your time.
Pleasure.
You know, both Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Armen Grigoryan, the Secretary of Armenia's Security Council, made criticisms of Russia's role in what's going on. There is talk amongst analysts about whether Russia is unwilling to end this blockade or whether it is unable. What do you think about Russia's play?
Well, that's the ultimate question. There's only two variables, and those are the only two variables. One is that there's some kind of a coordinated dance with the regime in Baku, targeting Armenia, the state, and this particular government. Trying to bring it to heel or make the government fall, and because they know that the Achilles heel of any Armenian government is the issue of Artsakh and the vulnerability of people living there, or Russia is too weak and is being pushed around by this third-rate thug in Baku. So as days goes by, and just the theatrics of what you see, and the fact that the Russian officials only, over the slightest statement from an Armenian leader, they'll go crazy, while, they will put up with any humiliation that comes their way from Baku. So as the days go by, it becomes more likely this is actually something that could very well be coordinated and is, using Armenia's Achilles heel, which is the vulnerability of the Armenians of Artsakh, to destabilize the country, and more precisely, to push back on the westward direction of policy that is happening in Armenia as we speak.
Mm. And also, Mr. Ruben Vardanyan was appointed as the state minister of Artsakh, which is akin to the prime minister, not so long ago. And, I want to ask, many Azerbaijani officials have been demanding his immediate resignation. How do you rate Mr. Vardanyan's tenure so far?
Well, the fact that they want him gone shows the proof of his effectiveness, or they fear his future effectiveness, and the fecklessness of the people that he replaced. They were more than willing to deal with people who didn't have either the financial reach or the wherewithal or the personal reach around the world that involves political leaders, opinion makers. He travels in very elite circles, so he has far more reach, and he's actually quite problematic. And he's actually been a very strong leader in making the case, and has the ability to get in front of international media and make a compelling case in English, which is not something that most Artsakh leaders have ever been able to do. So the fact that they're against him is the proof of his virtue.
Mm. And I spoke to Mr. Vardanyan recently, and I posed this question, which I would like to pose to you as well. Is there a way to make Azerbaijan's coercive and aggressive policies backfire on itself?
Yes, the way to do that is to internationalize the issue. Now the issue is, do you have the ability to do it, or is there enough attention span in the world, given the time frame and all the things going on in the world? But anything that internationalizes this issue essentially makes the issue of the rights of the Armenians of Artsakh to live in peace, to live in their ancestral land and not be ethnically cleansed, an international issue and not something to be kicked around by local authoritarian leaders in between themselves, is a definitive plus. And where the biggest issue there is, at this point, is the airlift, because if this continues, the calls for an airlift, which have already started from the government in Artsakh, and it's starting to go around the world, are going to become louder and louder. And an airlift automatically makes this an international issue and makes the protection and survival of the Armenians of Artsakh an international issue. So yes, the opportunity is there to take this and then to take the issue, which is the rights and the rights to liberty and protection of the Armenians of Artsakh, which have been entirely marginalized. And the Aliyev regime has spent a lot of political capital trying to marginalize this issue and make the issue about borders with Armenia, aggression against Armenia, front and center. So that's the way you turn that around. Now, that's how you do it tactically. Whether you actually succeed or have the ability to do it, those are two different things.
And the government in Yerevan has been criticized by some circles. A few days ago, the government held an award ceremony, for example. The wife of the Prime Minister, Eric Hacopian, was criticized for various social media posts she made. Do you think they're taking what's happening in Artsakh seriously enough?
I think so, but that's not the issue. Is how actively are they making enough of a fuss internationally? Are they leaving too many things behind closed doors? Those are fair criticisms. Some of the things done by the First Lady were frankly silly and stupid. She had this long rant post which made absolutely no sense and became a talking point for the other side very quickly. So I don't even understand where she even comes from, because I don't see how that helps her husband politically. But overall, I mean, they're striking the right tones, but we don't know what pressure they're under behind the scenes to back off here or to talk more about this and not to raise particular issues. But I think there's just as a nation, not just a state, we should be raising a far bigger stink than we are at this point. And there's not enough voices, there's not enough action, and there's not enough anger, frankly, at what's going on. So you can blame the government on that front, and because they're the lead. But it's very hard to judge exactly what they're doing or not doing, because so much of the stuff happens behind closed doors.
And my final question, Eric, is two prongs. First off, the Armenians in Artsakh, no freedom of movement, severe impediment to their access to healthcare, to foodstuffs, for example. And yet, the Armenians in Artsakh remain resilient. They remain defiant as well, even holding a massive rally in Stepanakert where thousands turned out. What can be said of the Armenians of Artsakh who are currently under siege? And secondly, Eric, what would your message be to diaspora and Armenian communities around the world who feel like they're almost looking on helplessly? What would your message be to them?
Well, first and foremost, they're a heroic people that are on the front line of the war against international fascism. And let's just be clear about that, what they're up against, especially if this is some kind of a cabal between the regime in Baku and the Russians, the Russian state. That would be an abomination from hell if that's actually true. They're up against that, and they're not, obviously they're under great duress, but they're not blinking. Furthermore, this is not the first blockade of Artsakh. In 1992, Artsakh was under blockade. Stepanakert was under blockade for 3 months. So this is nothing new to the region. This is the systematic way that the Aliyev regime now and previous regimes have tried to ethnically cleanse, or needed, backed up by the threat of genocide against the Armenians of Artsakh. So this is not the first time that that's happened. So their stance is heroic, but heroism has its limits. So that what that calls for, and this goes to your second question, is strong solidarity campaigns from around the world. On some level, the silence of the diasporas, because they're sort of directionless as far as what they should be pushing for. But that's no excuse either, because the talking points are clear. It's airlift, open the road, internationalize the issue. Do not let this be an exclusive Russian thing. The rights of the Armenians of Artsakh need to be at the center of all of these talks, because they actually is the center of all these talks. No matter what the great powers try to marginalize this, that we don't want to talk about Artsakh, we want to talk about Armenia and Azerbaijan and all these things. The rights of the Armenians of Artsakh needs to be at the center, and their protection as a primary issue of conversation. And that's something where the diaspora should take the lead, actions in solidarity. And this needs to be creative things, not four people standing in front of the EU building, take nonviolent, creative responses. And everybody should do their bit. And I think we need to not stop and wait for this organization, that organizations will get around to it. But if there's 20 student activists someplace, come up with your own plan. It's the old Maoist thing: let 1,000 flowers bloom, let 1,000 ideas compete. So I think we need to have people take ownership of the issue, make it their own, and act. That's the key: to act, to do something, and to raise the issue. It's a hard thing to do, but given the fact that this has essentially become a directly humanitarian issue, and if it's actually the case that the Russian state is actually in cahoots with the regime in Baku, given the state of what the perceptions of the Russian state are internationally, it's very easy to connect this to Ukraine and other things and use this as an example of why this regime, why the government in Russia should not be responsible for the protection of the Armenians of Artsakh. So yes, on the one hand, there's not enough direction, but on the other hand, people shouldn't wait for direction. People should take leadership. They should take ownership, and they need to act. That's the key: is to act, not talk. To act. That's what we need to do across the board.
Okay. Well, Eric, thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.